Hi, come on in. I'm making homemade yogurt today. I love to make homemade yogurt and I make it on a regular basis. If you are trying to save money and you want a product that you have full control over, this is a great way to do it. I really love thick Greek style yogurt, and have you seen the price of it lately? It is so expensive. This is a great way to save money because we buy the milk when it's on sale and we can just stockpile it in the freezer for whenever we want to use it. So come on in and I will show you how easy it is to make your own homemade yogurt. I have a 5-quart stock pot here that I'm going to start adding my milk to. I normally use 3% milk when I'm making my yogurt because I love it so thick. It helps to start with a higher milk fat. But you can do this just as easily with a lower percentage milk. Today I am mixing in a 1% milk because we had one that was in the back of our freezer that kind of expired a while ago. So I am using that to get it used up. And one of the other things I like to do when I am making homemade yogurt, which I will not be doing today just because I don't have any, is I like to add about half a cup of powdered milk to about a gallon of milk. If you have that, that's a great option to do because it does create a thicker product and it gives it a creamier mouthfeel. But if that's not something you have on hand, it's not a necessity. It's not required to make yogurt. Really, in the grand scheme of things, you need milk and a starter culture, which you can get by buying a plain unsweetened yogurt at the store or borrowing it from a friend, or you can actually buy yogurt starter to use in your yogurt. I am going to bring this up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 80 degrees Celsius. I will just use an instant read thermometer, but if you've got one of the ones that clips onto the side of your pot, that works as well. The trick with yogurt is to either stir it constantly on a higher heat or put it on a lower heat and stir it occasionally. You want to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom and especially that it doesn't scorch because your yogurt's going to taste a little scorched. Don't ask me how I know. I like to use a whisk to keep the milk moving, but you can use whatever you have on hand. A wooden spoon or a plastic spoon is fine. I do like to keep the milk moving as much as I can. I kind of like to use a higher temperature and just sit here and stir constantly than to have to try to remember to keep coming back to it over time. It just depends on what your situation is and how much time you have to do this. Now that it is up to 180, I like to take it up to about 182, 183, just in case my thermometer is off by a little bit. I will be taking the pot over to my sink and I have it filled up with some cold tap water that I will use to bring the temperature down quickly. I want to bring the temperature down to 110. You can let it sit here with a lid on and just let it go down on its own, but I find that takes a long time and you get a bit of a skin that forms on top. And I'm not sure if there's a good way to prevent the skin. I think just by having the lid on with the humidity, it prevents it from skinning over too badly, but it's possible to get a skin. So I find that if I just put it in a sink full of cold water and I just keep stirring it, that it does kind of help keep the skin from forming, and then I don't have to worry about weird bits of milk stuff in my yogurt. And then while it's in my sink of water, I do give it a stir every once in a while to keep it moving. I will also take the pot and I'll move it in the sink just a little bit, and that sort of swirls the water around and refreshes it a little bit. But if the water in the sink gets too warm and I don't feel like it's cooling effectively, I will swap out the water for fresh water that is cooler, and it helps keep the temperature going down to where I want it. And again, we want to aim for about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't waste the water. I actually have like a jug that I use to water my houseplants with. There's nothing wrong with this water. It's clean. I'll just scoop some of it out and water my plants with it. Here we are at the next step. I have a yogurt culture that I have frozen. Whenever I am at the grocery store and I see plain yogurt on sale at a discount or whatever, or for a good price, especially if it's a brand I like, I will pick it up and just freeze it into serving sizes that I can use for making yogurt. This one is still a little on the frozen side, so I will have to sort of break that up a little bit. It's been sitting for a little bit, but obviously not long enough to thaw it. I will put in a little bit of the warm milk, and that will help thaw it. It will also help distribute it a little more easily into the culture here that I'm going to be setting up. So I want to make sure it's spread evenly, or as much as I can get. I don't want to have too much of the starter yogurt in one jar and not enough in another jar. I will just sit here and break this down a little bit. Pretty much what you're looking for is a yogurt. If you're not going to buy packaged yogurt culture or something specifically for yogurt making, if you're just going to buy yogurt from the store, if you have some in your fridge, you want something that says live active cultures on it. And that states some bacterial names on it. If it doesn't say it's live, it's not going to work. I've tried Nancy's. I really liked Nancy's yogurt. I have tried Elenos. Elenos is really good yogurt. It is so expensive though. That is what I'm using today. We actually found some on clearance and it was a really good price. So I picked it up and that's why I divvied it out and threw it in the freezer. The best place to store it is a chest freezer. So if you have a chest freezer, that's the best spot. You probably don't really want to store it in a fridge freezer unless it frosts up. That's probably better because the frost-free ones, they go through like a little bit of a thaw cycle and you don't want to damage the live bacteria in your culture. So I normally try to keep these in a chest freezer or a deep freezer that maintains a stable temperature. And yep, they frost up, they're a pain to clean, but that's what I need. I'm going to try to get this to thaw. Sometimes I need to toss out what's already thawed and put in fresh, warm milk. I like to use these mason jars. They are the half-gallon ones, and I find that they work really nicely for making yogurt in. They fit in my dehydrator really nicely. Use what you have. If you just want to leave it in the pot with a cover on overnight, that works too. Something I do want to point out, and I don't know if it's just the cultures I'm using, which it could be, or if it's something I'm doing, I find that I cannot use the same culture more than like 2 times. So if I save a little bit of this one and make another batch of yogurt, it'll be fine. It'll taste slightly different, but it'll be fine. When I try to do it a 3rd time, I don't know if it's some of the bacteria are sort of dying off, or I'm getting an overpopulation of one that has an off flavor and doesn't yogurt well. It doesn't work for me a 3rd time. I'll either do it fresh each time. I only need a half cup of yogurt per gallon of milk. It is a little frustrating when you try to make a batch of yogurt and it doesn't yogurt. Now, in case you are interested, there is a way that you can just pour your milk into the mason jars, put it in a pot of water and bring the mason jars up to temperature and basically pasteurize your milk in the bottle. And then you can just add the culture, your yogurt, to each bottle and mix it in really well. I have done that in the past and it works pretty good. You're making less mess, but it is kind of handy. So if you've just got quart jars, I find quart jars, I can fit about 4 of them in my gallon pot here. It actually works really nicely. I've enjoyed using that method for the longest time because I don't have to worry about the milk scorching to the bottom of my pot. I started switching over to this one because it was easier to distribute the yogurt between the jars more evenly by having it just go into the main pot and then divvying it up. It kind of depends on how you want to do it. It also depends on what you are looking at for maintaining temperature. If it's easier for you to keep it in a pot of warm water and just heat the water up a little bit every once in a while, then that's what's going to work for you. You have to work with the equipment you have. And I don't know why a gallon of milk always fits in 3 jars, but it does. I always assumed it was because of the milk powder, but I didn't add milk powder this time, so obviously it isn't the milk powder. I am going to put a lid on these jars and I am going to get them in my dehydrator at 110 degrees. I like to go overnight. This is one of the few things I normally do in the afternoon. I like to get all of my stuff done in the morning and then I don't have to worry about stuff like this in the afternoon and I can just focus on getting things done or, cooking dinner. These I start later in the day because I want them to go overnight. I have found personally with my conditions, I seem to find that about a 12 to 16 hour overnight in the 110 degree dehydrator gets me the yogurt I want. So it's nice and thick and it's yogurt. I have done it in the past where if I've used like Nancy's or some of the other cultures, I was able to do it in 10 to 12 hours. I could do it in one day, but I had to start really early in the morning. I don't know what's changed, but something changed. Even when I was using Nancy's, all of a sudden it wasn't working anymore at 110 for, the 10 hours. So I have switched over and I just do it overnight now. Keeps the house warm in the winter. I actually put my dehydrator outside in the summer, so I don't have to worry about heating up the house. Just an FYI. I will get these in my dehydrator. I'll show you, I don't know that you really need to see what a dehydrator looks like, but I've got one of the Excalibur ones, so these fit in really nicely, but I'll show you them going in, and, I just put it to 110 for like about 14, 16 hours and let it go from there. I will show you how this looks when it is ready. I just want to show you how the yogurt looks when it first comes out of the dehydrator. It's got, I don't know if you can see this line here. This is where the whey has accumulated. There's a whey pocket down here, which I don't always see, but does sometimes occur. And then if you tip it, notice how, although the whey is moving, the yogurt itself is not moving. So sometimes if your yogurt doesn't set, it will kind of be a little more jiggly, but it does help it to put it in the fridge to help it set up a bit more. So this just came out of the dehydrator. It is still a little warm and it's going to be a bit jiggly, but I'm going to put this in the fridge, help it solidify up, and then I can strain it and show you what the final product looks like. Because this is, right now this is just going to be regular yogurt. It's going to be a little thin and runny, but it'll taste good. It's just going to be a lot thinner. So it just depends on how you like your yogurt, whether you want to proceed to the next step or just sort of pour off a little bit of the excess whey and then enjoy it the way it is. The final product of your yogurt will depend on, personally, how you like it. I prefer, as I've mentioned several times, I prefer a thick Greek-style yogurt. But my husband and kids do prefer a thinner yogurt. Pretty much what I do, if you want a thicker yogurt, is I use a nut milk bag. I have used tea cloths in the past. I'll just take a clean dish towel and put it in my pot with a strainer and just let it sit. If you have cheesecloth, you could use that. You want something that's got a pretty fine pour size. Don't use the open style cheesecloth. You want the closed style. This is really thick. I may have let this go a little on the long side. That's okay. Yogurt, it's just about finding what you like personally and what works under your conditions. I have found that if I do my yogurt for too long, it's very sour. And I'm just not a huge fan of super sour yogurt. I do like my yogurt to be half sour, if that makes any sense. I have played with the amount of time that I let the yogurt incubate for, and each batch is a little different. You have to kind of play it by ear, but for the most part, once you have figured it out, there's not a whole lot of difference between batches unless you change where your culture comes from. So at this point, if you're not straining the yogurt, you can just stir all the extra whey back in, make it nice and smooth, and then add in your flavors and your sugar. I don't know if I would recommend putting it in a blender. I do find that when I blend the yogurt, like when I'm making a smoothie, it does seem to liquefy it, and then it's really runny. I guess if that's what you like, that's not what we like. I will let this sit probably for an hour or two, depending on how thick I want it to be. If I'm going to let it sit for half an hour, sometimes I'll just let it sit on the counter and just do a quick thickening. But if I'm going to let it sit for more than half an hour, I will put it in the fridge just to maintain the temperature so it doesn't go bad. It's just food safety. When this is done, I will show you how it turned out. It's just the basic thickness level that I prefer, but it's pretty thick. I like to enjoy this on granola. It kind of doesn't matter how thick or thin it is, but I prefer the flavor it provides when it's thicker than when it's thinner. So for me, it's more enjoyable to have it really thick because I'm not sweetening it.
2 hours later.
I would guess that it's been about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours since I started straining this. It's nice and thick. It has actually produced quite a bit of whey. There are lots of uses for whey. I normally just throw it out because I make yogurt so often that I would just be inundated with just so much whey. The half gallon that I strained, it'll fill this right up to the top. It's a really good amount of yogurt for using across the week. This is the thickness I like. It's really thick. I don't know if you can see just how thick that is. I mean, it just stays on the spoon. It does have a slightly cheesy taste to it, so if that's not your thing, obviously don't strain it for quite so long. And if you do feel like you overstrained it, just stir some of the whey back into it until you get the texture you want. That's probably the easiest thing to do instead of trying to check it all the time, is just to let it go for a decent amount of time and then just stir back in what you need for your texture. That's pretty much it. I like to use this with homemade granola. That's sort of like a summery breakfast for me, or, in the winter, sometimes I'll just use it as with the granola and have it as a bit of a dessert. Or the other fun thing to do is I like to use it as sour cream whenever we have tacos or something like that, just because I don't have to keep 2 products in the fridge. So it kind of saves me money in different ways. I like to wash my nut milk bag. I rinse it under running water in the sink, hot water, and clean it that way. I don't put it through the wash because I don't want it to taste like my soap, if you know what I mean. That is just something to think about. If you want to see my homemade granola, just let me know below and I will make a video on how I like to make chocolate homemade granola. It's really good and it keeps you full. Thanks for watching.